let's go to the end game. You play the game on the 28th of December. We are recording this video on the 30th of December 2023. And this is, hang on, we have to go back in the game. It was a 4-knight game. And we got into a rook endgame. And of course, the stronger you get, the more and more you will get into endgames and in proper endgames,
Yes,
which are...
sorry. Rook endgames is the most common endgames. Is that right?
That is correct by far. And the reason is that in the starting position, the rooks are in the corner, and it takes a lot of time to get them to the center. And bishops and knights get swapped off a lot, and the queens get swapped a lot, and then you're just left with rooks. So rook endgames are by far the most common endgames. Yes.
Because on paper, you'd think because the queen is the most important piece, that you keep it until the end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, true. But well, you just look at your own games. How many times do you get queen
Yeah.
swaps? Quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the rooks tend to remain longer because they just get into the game later. They normally stay on their first rank on open files or active files, but and of course you have bishop endgames, queen endgames, knight endgames. They all exist, but rook endgames are the most common. Yeah.
And I've got to say as well, like, um, so with the rooks and the pawn endgames, like the pawn is very obviously limited. They can only move one square at a time. The rooks are just one piece. Now I'm getting into this level. I think to myself, and please, correct me. How much technique is actually involved in the rook endgame? Because, like I said, the pawns can only do very little. There's only one piece on of rooks. How far does rook endgames deep and technique does it go?
Very, very far. Rook endgames are endlessly complicated. King and pawn endgames are endlessly complicated. There's
But do
nothing
you know
easy.
where I'm coming from, Rick? Because like I said, there's only pawns that can move a little bit, and then the rook. And when I get these positions, I go, oh, here we go, because I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I don't mean this in a rude way, but it seems very not simple, but it doesn't seem like a lot can really happen. But it's so difficult. It's a whirlwind, man.
Yeah, books this thick have been written on rook endgames, and they only cover part of it. It's a beautiful part of the game, and I think I told you studying rook endgames will also improve your middle game because you're really concentrating. Let's say in this case on the rooks, and you see everything that rooks can do, which will also help you in the middle game. But there's nothing simple about rook endgames or king and pawn endgames. I know there is even a position. I think we mentioned that last time. Even only 3 pieces on the board, king and pawn versus king, is a very difficult endgame, which is
Mm.
misplayed at levels a lot stronger than you many times. Even that, we said last time we can go into that king and pawn versus king, but it will take us a couple of hours to really for you to really master king and pawn versus king.
Yeah, and like I said, I know we haven't got into much and we're talking a bit, but I think sometimes these questions and these thoughts need to be worded and spoken because I have those questions, and it's like, man, like it's mad, isn't it?
It is, and but also there is so much. So if you most players at your level are very bad at end games. Maybe because they might think the same thing. Okay, end games they can't be that complicated, so we're gonna play everything out quickly. But there is so much to gain. You can win half draw lost positions. You can win drawn positions if you are good at end games, and it's an important. There's really 3 phases of the game: the opening, the middle game, and the end game, and they're all equally important
Brilliant. Thank you.
and equally complex.
Yeah.
But we'll see an example now. When we go through this end game, we'll see how much there is that you might not have thought there would be.
Brilliant.
It's a very good end game, of course, for white because he's 2 pawns up. You know,
Yay.
yay! Even a rook end
As
game with it.
usual, up a piece or sometimes up 2 pawns, but give it away.
Oh, you were up a piece earlier, were you?
No, no. So that's as we've seen in my games recently. I'm up a piece, aren't I? I'm up two
Okay.
pawns, and somehow, I seem to give it away. I know I didn't hear, but it's nice to hear. I'm always up pieces, is what I mean. So that's some positivity there.
Yes, of course. Yeah, no, great. Long may it last, and that is great. It means you're outplaying your opponents, and in this
Yeah,
case, you also have outplayed your opponent because you are 2 pawns up. He played rook d6. He's going after that pawn. Because then he can one pawn back. You know, that pawn is a little bit lonely. It's only defended by the rook, and you cannot really defend it one more time. But that's fine. Then you still be one pawn up. And that's actually what happens. We get the king and pawn endgame with one extra pawn. But as here, I'm starting the analysis here because there's one detail. You played a3. And that is not such a great move. And I just show you why. But really, if you only understand one thing from rook endgames, then it's this. You have rook endgames is all about activity. It's of course also about the number of pawns you have, but you really need to activate your rook in rook endgames. And here you give black the opportunity to activate his rook. What black could have done is take the pawn with check. You of course have to recapture, and then he has rook d2. Activating his rook on the second rank, you already know that, how strong rooks on the seventh rank can be. And he's not so much going after the d6 pawn, which is, he might want to get that pawn later. He's after either winning c2 or f2, and then his rook is really active. So active that, in fact, here, black probably has enough compensation for the material that he's down, because he's going to win one pawn back at least. And that pawn on d6 that you have has to be protected by the rook, which means you cannot activate your rook somewhere else, and his rook keeps attacking your pawns. So that was an option that black had here in this rook endgame. Do you see that?
Yeah. He's forking 2 pawns.
He's forking 2 pawns, so he's gonna, on the next move, he's gonna win one of them. Yeah, you might want to play one up, make a run with your passed pawn, but he's taking that one. He's attacking now the g pawn. You cannot really defend it with your rook, because then you're, if you this would be a passive rook move, because then that one goes, and then he has won his 2 pawns back already. So why this is, even though white is still a pawn up, why is this about equal? Is because black's rook is a lot more active than white's rook. Yeah. So I just wanted
for my rook to be active, what would you suggest here? Because it's on the first rank. Would I put it to e4, the middle of the board for starters, and then maneuver? What would you? How active is my rook? Would you say?
Yeah, your rook is not bad, but it does an important job protecting that pawn. As soon as the rook moves off the e file, he's going to take your pawn. But it's and it's hard to, well, one maneuver could be just to give up on that pawn and go for something like this, to try and attack that one, for example. So that you get 2 connected passed pawns on the queen side, but at the same time, he's very quick in cleaning up your king side, and then we have a very complicated endgame with passed pawns on either side. But to answer your question, that's a possible idea to activate your rook, go after the a5 pawn.
Yeah, because me looking after this e6 pawn, it's not pinned, but it's limited, isn't it, my rook, in a way?
Exactly. The rook is a bit stuck to defending that pawn, and that's not great. So you can't really activate it. And it probably makes more sense to go after the e5 pawn with your king, and then push those pawns on the queen side. That's probably the best plan. But yeah, it is well, there you go. This is a very difficult, complicated position where white is a pawn up, but black has good counterplay because of active rook. And this is not so easy to play.
Right.
But white's best plan is, I think, to go after that pawn with the king and then start pushing those guys forward and just, I guess, give up on those guys. What you definitely don't want to do is passively defend the g pawn, because now the rook is really unhappy. You give up on that guy, and you want to play for activity in the end game and not put your rook in a passive position.
Yeah.
Having said that, Aran, there are always exceptions to the rule. Sometimes you have to play in a passive way. I guess in this game, in this position, that would not be the way to play. Anyway, we're going quite deep into this. So back to the start, king b2, he played rook d6, he played a3, and I just pointed out to you that he could have taken, you recapture, and then activate his rook and get compensation for the pawn that he's down. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the first time we dip our toe in rook endgames. So this is all new to you. But let's see what happened in the game. Because he took on e6. Well, black has to be, because now the endgame transposes from a rook endgame into a king and pawn endgame. And black has to be sure that this is okay for him. Of course, he wins a pawn back, but is he sure that he can hold the king and pawn endgame a pawn down? I don't know how long black thought about this move, but I would say keep the rooks on the board. Look for activity for the rook. Rook d2 also in this position is an option. Attack your kingside pawns and not going to the king and pawn endgame, but keep the rooks on the board. But okay.
And that's why I took, because I felt I was in a better position.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is a great it's a great king and pawn endgame with an extra pawn. So you took, he took, and now we have this king and pawn endgame, and you played it really well. You have an extra pawn. Usually, the rule of thumb is that if you have one extra pawn in the king and pawn endgame, you have a winning position.
Right.
There's millions of exceptions, but that is the rule of thumb. So you are right to trade the rooks, and now you just have to, well, where do you want to play? It's very obvious. You have 3 versus 2 on the queen side, so that's, and your king is there already, so that's where you want to play. You know, you don't want to push your king side pawns forward because you cannot make a passed pawn there. So you did it really well. You took on b4. He has to recapture, and you just played c3 to create a passed pawn.
Yes.
You took, no choice. You took, and now you have that simple plan of running that b pawn up the board.
Correct.
So with a winning position, king d5. b4, the king doesn't have time to start eating pawns on the king side. He'd be way too late. So he has to try and defend. You bring your king up. You have to play with all your pieces. King b6. And you played f3. No need for f3, but it's not a bad move. It doesn't ruin anything. King c6, b5 check.
Well, if we go back 2 moves before I played f3, what would I have played here? I would have played b5.
Yeah, b5. Let's play
And
b5.
then, right, and then what would he have played? He would have to go back.
Well, he can keep the king there for the moment. He can also make pawn moves on the king side just to mark time. But if he wants to, if he plays his king, then he has to go back, and then you come even further. So, but your move f3 it's a bit of a waiting move. It doesn't ruin anything, and you have all the time in the world. You know, you can have a cup of coffee and your position. You can make all sorts of pawn moves on the king side and still have a winning position. He played king c6, b5 check. Of course, he could have gone back to b6, but he went voluntarily to the 7th rank. Well, thank you very much. If you give me space to go into, then I will. So he played king c5, king c7. By the way, I didn't check, but I presume, I have the feeling that both players played really quickly here, because that's what players at your level from about 1,000 do. They think this is simple, but it is not. Although in this position is simple, but it becomes complicated in a moment. Check, king b7. You make another waiting pawn move. He makes a waiting pawn move. King b5, g5, king c5, g4. Not gonna help. It's not gonna help black. You swap the pair of pawns.
Yeah.
And you played king b5, and now he decided he can still play his h pawn if he wants to wait, but he played king c8. You played king c6, and you played king b8. He played king b8. You pushed b7, and he played h5, and you played king b6. And here, black resigned. This is the final position.
Yeah.
I saw the game, and I wrote to you saying, what would you have done if he had played h4 here?
Yeah. Can I just say, my thought process was, if I keep moving my king b6, c6, and he moves his pawn, I'll take the h pawn with my g3 and I'll run it up. And then I thought, he can't stop both. That was my thought process.
Okay, good thought process. And now let's see if your thought with concrete analysis, concrete calculation also works. So king b6, right. He resigned. If you had played h4, you would have said, I would have taken that pawn and then run with it. What does black play?
That's stalemate.
Well, not yet. Black can move.
He's got one pawn,
Yeah,
g3. I
g3,
take, and then it's stalemate.
and then it's stalemate. So
Right.
that's a trick. And that's what that if I had been black, I would have played h4 and hopefully and hope that he would take the pawn because now after h4, g takes h4, it is a draw. Um, because g3 is the only move and you have to take it because if you don't take
Yeah.
it, black will make a queen much quicker than you do and you lose.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
So, but black didn't recognize that there was this option. So again, but we have 7 pieces on the board, and then we already have a difficult situation.
Yeah.
So let me ask you again: if you don't play, if after King B6 he plays H4, taking H4 leads to a draw, which is a pity because you have a winning position. Um, what would you play here instead?
I've had to think about this. Is it King C8, C6?
Okay, let's put it on the board. And as always, it's just a move, but I'd like to understand what was your analysis.
I'm trying to give him a square that he can go. So it when this happens on the right, the pawns, he's not stalemate. I'm trying to prevent stalemate, really.
Excellent, good, very good. You're preventing stalemate now. So if he takes the square for the king, if he plays his only square for the king is king a7, right? What do you do then?
I move the king to C7.
Exactly, king c7, and your next move is promotion, and you have a queen, and yeah, and we have a winning position. Okay, so he's not going to play king a7 because you have king c7 with a win. What if
Yes,
he what if he takes?
I have to take back.
You have to take back, otherwise the pawn goes through. And now it's not stalemate. He
But
has to.
if I leave this pawn to get this, I mean, I'll be in the same situation.
Well, it's black to play.
So who plays A7?
King a7,
Oh, now that oh yes, C7.
king c7, and promotion and an easy win, right?
I believe so.
Exactly. He has to play king a6, the only move. You promote. He has only one move, and you
And
know how to
then
win this.
yeah, and then from here, I will move the king to C6,
King c6.
and then he has to move. Should we play this out, please? And then A4, C5, A3, C4. I'm trying to prevent stalemate here as well. A2, C3, A1, Queen B2.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
Okay. So that's how
Right.
we do it.
So if we can start from the start position, because we've talked a bit there. If I can see practically how I would have done it again, please. So can we go back a move, please? Just right. No, a bit. Yeah. Right. So black to
Black,
move is it?
black to play. Yeah, he played h5.
Right. So H5. He plays H5. Then the question is, what do I do?
Well, you played king b6.
Okay. So I played King B6.
And he played h4. I mean, here he resigned, but I asked you the question, what do you do after
Yes.
h4?
Yeah. So this is the resign spot here, Rick.
This is here he resigned. He did not play h4, but if I had been black, I would have played h4 and prayed that he would take the pawn because that will be a
Right.
draw, as we just saw. If you take the pawn, I play g3, you have to take it, and it still makes.
Right.
Yeah?
So let's go to
I,
the resign position, please.
yep.
Right. So he resigned here. But let's say the resign doesn't happen. It's black to move. So black plays H4.
Yeah, by the way, it's his only legal move. It's the only move
Yeah.
he can make, but it is also a tricky move because
Right.
you
And then
cannot
I
take it then.
said I'll play C6.
King c6.
And I'm assuming A6 works just as well.
You should never assume. You have to calculate. So let's have a look. King a6. Is it the same
And
thing?
then because the black king can always move to C7.
Yeah.
And then I can move to A7.
exactly. And
And
you have
then
the same
okay,
thing.
yeah,
The mate will take a little longer because his king is in the open, but that doesn't matter.
yeah.
But I guess he doesn't have after king a6. He doesn't have to play his king. He can also do this,
And then I take. Oh, it's. Oh yeah. Then he's got that C7.
and then we have this and this, and
Yeah.
so similar to what we just saw. So you're right. King c6 or king a6 both win the game.
Right. So because I diverted there, sorry, if we can go back to the resigned position again, just so I grasp this. Sorry. Right. So black plays the move H4, only legal move. Right. So he plays H4. I recognise that if I take, he has one more move, take, then it entered stalemate. So I don't take. So black's wishing me to take. I don't comply to that. What I do is prevent stalemate by playing C6. And I recognise that I'm cutting the king off as well with the A and B file, which will lead to a faster checkmate
Yeah,
because the king was
exactly.
in the open. Right. Then he plays G3, pawn G3. I say, okay, I take back. He now can't go to C8 or A8, and he can't go to C7, so he goes to A7. I then support the pawn with C7. He moves to A6, and then I move to B8. And then, as we've just seen, we follow it to checkmate.
Exactly. Yeah.
My mind, Rick, it's like boom, 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 boom,
Yeah, no,
because
this
I'm
is
learning.
tough. And we're not even finished yet because I think we've exhausted this now. King b6, h4, and the move is king c6. And we just so this is right. It's correct. We just saw the line after take. He has to play king a7 and he gets checkmated. All good. But there's another branch we have to look at because black does not have to take on g3. He can also play h3. That's another line we have to look at. So the only change is that instead of black taking, he now pushed the pawn. Yeah, that's where we are.
But then he has to still play A7 next.
Well, it's white to play.
Oh, white to play.
Now he just played h3, right? Instead of
Oh.
taking the pawn, he has now pushed the pawn. Are you with me?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
if I
So
play B6, it's stalemate.
king
So
b6
it
is still.
seems like I'll have to give up on the pawn.
Yeah, correct.
I can't play C7, B6, C6. So I'll have to give up on the pawn. So I'll have to play D5.
King d5.
He takes my pawn. I play E5. He plays C6. Bit of quiche chase. F4. He plays D5. Right, I take the pawn on G4. He moves to E4. I take the pawn on H3. What does he play? What? F3, let's say. What would you recommend?
Well, I'd like my king somewhere there to try and stop your
Yeah.
pawns.
Right, so F5. Right. Do I push to G4? And then do you want to say black's moves, Rick? Because I'm not too sure.
Sure, I play king g5. Let's see if you can beat me from here.
You're right. G3, King G3.
King g6.
Pawn to H4.
King h6.
G5 pawn.
King g6.
King G4.
King g7.
Pawn H5.
King h7.
I'm trying to think now. Is it best for me to push the pawn to G6, or is it best to get my king to G? Okay, I'll push the pawn G6.
King g7.
King G5.
King G8.
Here we go. This is where I'm getting a bit nervous now. Pawn H.
Pawn
Pawn
H6.
H. Yes.
King in the
What's he
corner.
got? Right. This is where I get the cup of coffee now.
Yeah. If because
Right.
you always have 6 minutes left at the end of your game. Here you need to invest 2 minutes to calculate it till the end.
Yeah. So if I play, I can't see. This is tough. If I play G7, let's say,
King
where can he
H7,
go? Okay. And then hold on. I play King F6.
King F6, King G8. Because I'm not gonna take your pawn because you promote, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna play it as tough as I can with King G8.
So I can't take. You take. There. No, no, no. That's stalemate. I have to play the king away.
To where?
E7.
King E7. King H7.
King F7.
King F7. Only move.
G5. G8, sorry. Man,
Well done.
that was tough.
Well done. Yeah. So,
But I know that doesn't go as easy as that. They can do this, I can choose this, and then before you know it, I'm in stalemate.
well, that's you played it really well because I played the best moves for black.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are no great moves. You played it really well, and I know
Yeah.
you were suffering there at the end and you're getting nervous, but that's where you just need to sit on your hand and calculate it out. Make sure you avoid stalemate, and then look for the right sequence. And you found it, so well done. And by the way, sorry, when we got here, this is where you said, "Oh, I need to move my king." You don't have to move your king. You also just show you one very nice line. You can also give up on the H pawn. He has to take it, of course. And what do you do then?
King F7.
King F7. And the next move you promote. So that's also something to keep in mind. Sometimes just to make your own life easier when you have something like this, you have two extra pawns. You really don't need to queen them both. One is enough. And you just can give up one in this way. Black has no choice. He has to take. And then you get your king in to cover the promotion
I
square.
have
And just,
I have been doing a bit of homework, just looking at certain videos of these end games just to see.
yeah,
That's why I probably played that. I survived that, but
yeah.
still very
Oh,
tough.
you did really well, and don't so you're in those type of positions. Your only danger is stalemate, and that's what you have to. But you played it really well. You push your pawns up. You had your king supporting the pawns, and then you worked it out in the end. The way you played it with King E7 is perfect because King A7 is the only move, um, and then you also get your king to support the promotion square. So you also give up that H pawn. I just showed you a different way to do it, which is not better or worse. It's just a different way.
So
But
my
well done.
question is, if you've got one pawn in the end game, you can definitely win then, can't you, really? Because here I've got two. So if I've got one, I know that might change things a bit.
It
But
changes things a lot. And
yeah,
the answer to your question is that in some cases you can win with king and pawn versus king. In some cases it's a draw. And to teach you when it is a win and when it is a draw, that will probably take us a couple of sessions, full
that's
sessions, to really get to the bottom of that. That's how difficult chess is. With three pieces on the board, it's already complicated.
can we just can we go back to the position where I went up, where you played for black and I promoted there, please?
Yeah, so we did h4, king b6, he resigned, and instead of h4, king c6, and then I played, instead of taking the pawn, I played h3, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah.
mean, just when we just had a practice goal, can you get that position back up?
Well, that's this position.
Oh, no, I mean the one where we, just where I was promoting and then I just promoted
Oh,
now.
sorry.
That
This position, right to
yeah.
play?
yeah. So here I would play white to play.
Yeah,
I would. Oh yeah, H7 takes F7, and then he moves this to H6, and then I promote G8. And then here I would just move the king down the F file again, and then bring the queen in
yeah,
to G2.
yeah. I show you a nice mate in two as well. The way you did it is perfectly fine, but also black has to play king h5, and here there's a nice mate in two. Look at this one. You'll enjoy this. Queen g3 is a nice move. Okay, you can find the checkmate on the next move.
And then the black has to move.
Black has to move,
So black moves to H6. And
and now
then
there's
I'm
two mating
G6.
ones. G6 is checkmate, and where else is it checkmate as well?
H3.
No,
Oh no. Um um King F6.
it's not even check.
Oh yeah. Do you know what? That was that was confusion. So the first checkmate is G6,
Yeah.
and there's another checkmate.
Uh-huh.
It's got to be H4.
It is indeed. Queen g6 and queen h4 are mating ones. So I'm I'm only showing you this. So after g8, queen, king h5, yes, you can run down with the king like you just showed me. That's mate in a few moves, but you can also just take the h4 square away. He has to go back, and then you have two possible checkmate moves. Just to show you the alternative quicker win, but the way you did it was perfectly fine as well.
Right, just for my mind, can you just go back a bit? Sorry. So when I promoted the queen, so the pawn to the yeah, right. So this is where we were. So you know the two checkmates in one. That sorry, not two checkmate. You know the two checkmate attempts that
Yeah,
you've just shown me. Can you just go through the again? Sorry.
sure. So you've promoted the pawn, g8 queen, and the king is already cut off on the h
So
file,
and
so
then
there'd be a quick checkmate.
yeah,
He has only one legal move, king h5. And you said
mm,
I'm gonna, bring the king down and
yeah,
chase him all the way down and checkmate, which is perfectly fine. But you can also play queen g3 here, giving
yeah,
the giving the move to black, who still has only one move. So what you're really doing is you take the h4 square away.
yeah.
So you force him back, and now you have the two checkmates mating
Oh yeah,
once.
G6 and then H4. H4 is unique. That's a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Yeah,
Can't go there, can't go there, can't go there, can't
the
go
king,
there, can't go there.
the king does a great job keeping those squares away, and the queen does the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's maybe a mating pattern you haven't seen yet. So, and again, I'm not trying to be
No, no.
smart
Yeah.
ass here, but it's good to see those checkmate patterns and get them ingrained in your brain. As I said, the way you did it is perfectly fine. I just wanted to show you the alternative,
Oh
which is
yeah.
the mate in two.
That's brilliant. Rick, thank
Hmm.
you for that.
Okay, so conclusion is, you know, Mr. Sebulmer resigned his position, but we just about half an hour talked about his position. There's a lot more to it than you probably both thought.
Of
He he,
course, yeah.
he resigned. He was right to resign because White has a winning position, but he could have tried h4. And if you then automatically take that pawn, it's a draw, as we saw, because of the stalemate. But after king c6, we saw that the easy win is if he takes on g3, it's recapture. It's black to play. He has to play king
Yeah.
a7, and your pawn promotes. And if he plays a little bit more tough after king c6, he plays h3. Then it's a little bit more difficult. He cannot go back to b6 because of stalemate. But then you very convincingly showed that the white king is much better, much more active then the black king, and you clean up those 2 pawns, and you showed how you can win the endgame with 2 pawns against the king.
So just some general rule of thumb. I know there's exceptions, and but like principles in the opening: develop your pieces, control the center, castle. For for me to take away, because obviously this is based on position based, but some general sort of rule of thumb, you would say rook activation, obviously activate the king, push past pawns if so. Anything, please, that you can share that isn't position based? Because when
You,
I let's say I get the
you said it all.
yeah
In endgames, piece activity is crucial, and make sure all your pieces play. So that's why the king has to play as well. The only exception is in queen endgames. Then you might want to keep your king safe somewhere
yeah
because the queens are so strong. You get a million checks. Um, that's the only exception. But in rook endgames, bishop endgames, knight endgames, pawn endgames, you have to activate your king. So activate as much as possible and push past pawns. The further they get, the more threatening they are. Um, and look out, be careful for any stalemate tricks in king and pawn endgames.
brilliant. Thank you, Rick. That was amazing.
Okay, yeah. So it's something we haven't really worked a lot on endgames, but yeah, this was just it triggered me when I saw that position. I thought, why did he not try h4? Your opponent, but it shows that your opponent, who's at the same rating level, thought it was all over after king b6. But we just saw that. So if he had had more endgame knowledge than you, he might still have saved half a point after h4. Because you might have taken that pawn and then it's a draw.
Rick, when early on before we started recording videos and putting them up, when it used to be, a year ago when we would just do the videos, you introduced it rook end games. I know it's one of your 4 pillars where you say study the classics, study tactics, study rook games. And what was the fourth one? Sorry.
Yeah, study. What did I say? Study the classics, tactics, end games, and analyze your own games.
Yeah. I don't think I was quite ready yet for the rook end games, but now I've got burned. Now I've got some experience. Now I've gone and got my feet wet. I can come back and I have reference experience now. So this is where I'm hitting that sort of unconsciously, no, I'm consciously incompetent, where I know I'm not doing well. Before, I knew I wasn't doing well, and I don't know why I wasn't doing well. Now I'm aware that I'm not doing well, but I'm not doing well. Soon it will be, the 4 levels of learning, like.
Yeah.
Um, so hopefully I'll move into the next one,
Oh yeah,
consciously competent. Um,
definitely.
Rick, obviously I'm conscious of time because it's 6. What do you want to do? Do you want to do a few tactics, or what do you want to do?
Let's do a few tactics and then we call it a day. Let's do 3 of them. All good
Yeah.
things come in threes. Um, yeah, and just one last comment on the end games, and I said it before, but the great thing is of studying end games will also help you your middle game. You really start to, and let's say you study a knight end game, well then you learn a lot about the knight as a piece, which will help you in middle games as well. So it's a time well invested. And also now that as your rating grows, you'll get more end games on the board because not everybody will blunder away pieces and rooks and everything else before that. And then
Yeah.
you get a lot more end games to play, which is the important part of the game.